Hi everyone. Hi everyone that is at home. Thank you for joining us. So we are back with our xbytes by sponsored by XKids and promoted by Tech Talks after our summer break and KCD Port organization. We are not able to do our live stream during the summer or September, but we are happy to say that we are back. And today we have with us Dario Vega. Thank you, Dario. Thank you for accepting the challenge, and also thank you to Otavio for doing this bridge between us. Dario is a project manager at Oracle, and today we'll speak a little bit about building scalable cloud-native serverless applications using NoSQL Cloud Services. And during your talk, Dario, I will interrupt you with our famous bytes. So at least three times our viewers are already use it to that. So and then I will ask you some questions, and then we can move forward. And I hope this open the debate and the discussion between us and our audience. So I think this is it. Our audience is not here to listen to me, is for listening and hear your insights. So the stage is all yours, Dario. Go ahead and hope you enjoy and have a great time.
Okay, hello. Thank you, Fabio. So my name is Dario. I live in Paris. So as Fabio told us, I am product manager at Oracle. I am working specifically with NoSQL databases and in-memory databases, so distributed databases. In the past, I was also cloud architect, so it is why I was interested in cloud native and serverless application, and I continue to be interested in this topic. So I am trying to join what I learned what I was a cloud architect and what I am doing now as product manager. So instead of doing a presentation, I prefer to do a demo. And for this demo, I prepare a workshop. So if you are interested to run all the workshops, we have detailed instructions on all the topics that we will cover today. So just let me show you how to find this workshop. So to go to Oracle Live Labs. So here you have access to our live labs. So you have multiple and a lot of interesting topics. And if you look for NoSQL, we build currently we have 4 or 5 live labs, and today we will execute this one. So okay, what is the idea of this workshop? So in the first part, we will learn a little bit about Oracle NoSQL database. I will show you what exactly is Oracle NoSQL database in the cloud, because we have the possibility to deploy Oracle NoSQL on-premise. And I will show you the difference when you are using on the cloud and when you are using on-premise. We will try to benefit of the JSON query language that we have in Oracle NoSQL. Today, I will not use Visual Studio Code and IntelliJ, but I will use something that we call OCI code editor. The main idea of this demo is that we are in a movie stream application and we need to provide a service, a catalog service. And for this catalog service, the challenge that I have is I want to use a Spring Data REST. So I will create a small service using REST services, okay? And I want to have this catalog distributed around the world. It means that, for example, if you have, in my case, I will have customers, for example, in Latin America, I will have customers also in Europe, and I will have also customers in, for example, in Japan. And I want to provide the best latency for all of them. It means that when I am connecting to my application, depending on where my customer is located, I will redirect to the good data center. For example, if you are in Latin America, for example, I can redirect to Sao Paulo. If we are here in Europe, I will redirect to Paris. And then if we are in Japan, I will redirect to Japan. So that is the main idea. In order to do this, I will use a service called GeoSteering. That is a DNS service that allows to use this. Okay. But for today, we will be focused real in the backend. Okay. So we will work a little bit about NoSQL, okay, that is our Kubernetes managed service. But again, here, instead of using a Kubernetes, I will use something that we call container instance. So I will, in this case, I don't need the full orchestration platform. Okay, so I just want to create a container image. So I just want to show you what I did, and then I will deploy my application in a container instance, but it is very easy to deploy this application using a Kubernetes cluster. So it is why we are talking about a cloud native application. So I want to start. So just before to start, I want to go to the lab too, and I think that we prepared some questions with Fabio.
Sure. I'm here. So yeah, the first question that I want to highlight and you for answer to all of our audience is when you are talking about NoSQL database, what are you expecting to deploy? So which are the main bases on that? Sorry, Dario, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. I was
No.
a little disturbed. Okay, so we have multiple possibilities when we are talking about databases. Sometimes we are expecting to have a database that have JSON support. In other case, we are expecting to deploy, for example, a distributed database, so that shared database, a shared nothing database. So in this case, we will deploy a cluster. And in this case, what we are trying to do is, in my case, I am interested to deploy objects. So in this case, I will call these tables, but it could, if you prefer, you can call these collections. In fact, it depends on where are you coming from in the NoSQL database. For example, in my case, we start working as a key value store. Then we add a catalog, and by adding the catalog, we are able to create collections. So just let me show you how it works on Oracle NoSQL database. So the first thing is I will go to the cloud. And as you can see here, we have multiple regions. So I can connect to Sydney, I can connect to Paris, I can connect to Tokyo, and I will start in Paris. And I will go to Oracle NoSQL database. Okay, another way to go is go to here. You have all the flavors of the Oracle database that we have. In database, we have also MySQL, Postgres, and we are going to Oracle NoSQL database. So the first thing, as you can see here, is we are not deploying any instance. So in our case, of course, behind the scene, we deploy a cluster. This cluster is sharded and is replicated around the data centers. For example, if we are in Ashburn, we have 3 data centers. So every time that you are writing a data, you are writing the data in 3 data centers. When we are in Paris, we have what we call fault domains. So every time that you are creating a data, you are replicating the data between the fault domains. So in this case, we can say that behind the scenes, we have a shared distributed cluster. So that is a NoSQL database. Again, we started as a key value store, but now we are able to do what we call tables, or if you prefer, collections. So just let me create the first table. So in this case, we will go to our instructions, and I simply follow the instruction. So the first thing that I need to say, so instead of saying how many nodes I need in order to satisfy my workload, I will try to provide the characteristics of my table. So for example, in this case, I will say how many reads I am expecting for my workload. In this case, it's a small workload, so I am saying I need 10 reads, 10 writes, and I will store only 1 GB of data. Then I will create what I call my primary key. So in this case, if you follow the instructions, I will create something that I call key. And again, I will decide that that is an integer. So that is the first thing that it is not in the presentation, but I want to share with you. As you can see here, we have the possibility to say that dash is a shard key. But we have also the possibility to add new columns. So it means that when you are creating a collection of a table in Oracle NoSQL, you have the possibility to create multi-columns. So for example, in my case, when I will create my Spring Data application, I will use only one column as identifier, but you can create an object that has a key that is a multi-key column. Okay, so just let me create our first. In this case, I will say that I will create a field that is a string. So as you can see here, we have the possibility to have multiple fields, and we have also the possibility to say that it's JSON. It means that when you are working with Oracle NoSQL database, you have the possibility to have what we call schema flexibility. So you can say in one side, I can say, I will use an schemaless application, or I will define all the structure of my application. You could see I have also, in other cases, we are saying I have a schema free, and then I will provide what is the schema for my rows. Okay. So in this case, I will create this, and I have also the possibility to set what we call time to live. So it means that I will say that the data will expire automatically after 7 days. Just let me create my table and the name. So that's it, just for a simple example. Okay, so as you can see here, it is creating, and I finish. Okay, I can create all the tables that I need to create. And behind the scene, you don't know if it is one cluster, if it is two cluster, if it is three cluster, or it is four cluster, how many nodes I have in my cluster. That is something that we are doing. You are just accessing to a full managed service. Okay, so just let me deploy in another way. So we have the possibility to deploy in other ways. So currently I will go to my editor, and in the terminal, I will execute some commands. So in this case, we will create another table, but instead of using the console, I will execute using what we call OCI CLI commands. So in this case, I am executing this. I am waiting. And it will create the table, so it is success. And as you can see here, now I have a table that we call movie. The interesting thing is in the next labs, I will show you how to create this using GitHub Actions, for example. So that allows you to create your table using GitHub Actions. But we have also the possibility to create this table using Terraform, or create this table using other tools for this, so infrastructure as a code. So as you can see here, what is interesting for you is the object that you are creating, for example, for your Terraform is a table. It is not a database instance, and you are not creating anything inside the database instance. Okay, so just let us create some data to see how it works. So the first thing that I will do is insert a row. I will go forward. So we have multiple possibilities. So we have the possibility to use SQL, or we have also the possibility to use CRUD API. So create, read, update, and delete API. So I will start with the SQL API. So instead of doing a select, I will execute this. And as you can see here, I insert my first row. And in this case, I will have a field that I call American Mystic. This have a queue. Here I have the information about the director. And I have also some data. I will show you in the next lab why how we are creating those data. Okay, so just let me continue. Now I will insert multiple data. So in order to do this, I will save this file. Just let me show you how it looks. So as you can see here, I have multiple JSON documents with the information for multiple movies. So now instead of using the SQL, I will use our CRUD API. So I will upload the file that I have here. So movie JSON. And now I have 51 rows. So if I come here and I execute again, oh, sorry, I will have all of those data. And if you look inside, for example, here I have Gladiator, I have a queue. In this case, I have an array with multiple fields. So I have the producer, I have the job, the executive producer, I have the name for the executive producer, I have the genre is an array. So we have an interesting collection for this case. Okay, so Fabio, it is time to continue. So I think that we have some questions.
Exactly. So nice timing. So I think this question is about building and deploying microservices using Spring Data and NoSQL. So with that in mind, this is a very good question. And what is your favorite Java platform and why?
Okay, I think that there is a lot of options. So we have Spring, we have Helidon, we have, I don't know, Liberty, we have Wildfly. I don't have a preference because I am not a Java developer. But for example, when I met Otavio, it was a really interesting discussion that I have with him because, for example, in my case, I am always using Spring because that is a popular framework. But we realized, and we did some examples using Quarkus. We did also some example using Helidon. In this case, instead of using Spring Data, we are using Jakarta Data. So it is very interesting to learn multiple frameworks. And I think that the best is not to have a favoritus. In my case, the favoritus in this case is Spring Data. But I think that we need to learn multiple frameworks. I don't know, when we are talking about language, we are talking about being polyglot. So for example, I learned to use Java, I learned to use Node.js, I learned to use Go, I learned to use Python. And I realized that I need to learn to use multiple frameworks. Okay, so just let me start with this application that we created using Spring Data. So we will review a little bit the code. Okay, so here, if you are at home, you can read the instruction, and the instruction I am providing for every single Java class. I am providing some insights that are interesting for you. So just let me show you how it works, how I develop this application. Okay, so just let me come to my editor. So I will go to my code. So here I have my source code. And of course, I have an application, and I will use some, that is the way to do the connection to my NoSQL cluster. And I will try you to explain what means this use delegation tokens and things like that. So the first thing, in order to do the connection, we will create this Java class that we call app.config. And as you can see here, I am just doing a configuration for an abstract NoSQL configuration. So I am retrieving my parameters. And when you are using Oracle NoSQL, you have multiple possibilities to do the connection. So the most common is we use what we call user principal. So it means that, for example, in my case, I am connected using Dario Vega, and I have the possibility to create what we call API keys. But when using this, it is up to me to rotate the credentials. So when you are deploying, for example, in Kubernetes, or when you are deploying using our container service, we have other possibilities to do the connection. One of them is what we call instance principal. Another one is what we call resource principal. but we have something that we call also a keyword load identity. So the main idea is instead of using a user, we will use a service. Okay, and that is what I am doing here. The next step is I need to create my class. So in this case, I will use my class movie. What I want to show you here is that I want to have an ID, that is movie ID. I will have a title. I will have a list. So in this case, an array that I will call genre, that is a string. I have an also specific field that we have Q, and it is a list of Q. And for this specific case, I choose to use data that is a map of a string object. So it means that in reality, I can put wherever that I want that is written in Java. For example, I can put another Q, or I can put another array or something else. Okay. So for example, the Q Java, you have the description here. So as you can see here, it is a job and an array and a list of names. So you have here, and it is why when you are creating your data, you will see that here you have in this field the information. So crew, it is exactly the field that we have in our object and in data object here. That is a list of crew. When we go to data, we have multiple possibilities. For example, for this one, I have an image URL. I have a list price. Okay, that is 0. I have the opening data. Okay, it is a specific field that I create because I was trying to maintain a synchronization with another system. And as you can see here, it depends on the field that we have one or multiple items in the class. Well, the other thing that we need to say, and it is interesting, is we will say what is the NoSQL table that we want to use. So in this case, we will use a table that we will call movie, but you can change the name. I will say that I will ask to our Spring Diver to create the table. Okay, or I have also the possibility to change the capacity. If you remember when we created the table, we did this. Okay, and finally, I will have my repository. And for this repository, I will have a REST resource. Okay, so I will use a Spring Data REST. So in this case, I don't need to create any more code. I will have automatically based on my repository. I will have the possibility to create. I have the possibility to update. I have the possibility to find bad ID. But as you can see here, I create also some queries that my end users can use. For example, find by title, find by table avec a regular expression. In your case, using a list of titles. And again, you have also the possibility to create all the other queries. And as you can see here, you don't need to create the SQL query. But the interesting thing is, for example, when we have data, and if you remember, data is something that is a map. So in this case, yes, we need to see what exactly we need to query. So in this case, for example, I create data views. And in fact, for some of those rows, I have the views for this movie. So I will look inside my table using this SQL query. So with this SQL query, as you can see here, we can do very interesting things. And it is a dialect of SQL. But if you look the queries that we are able to do, in fact, we are using a mix of jQueries and with SQL. So just let me continue and execute our application. So I just want to position in some variables. And I will execute my application. So I just want to be sure that I am using the good Java version. So currently we have Java 8, Java 11, and currently I will use Java 17. And if you look, that is our Graal VM that we are using Graal VM in this case. Okay. So just let me start the application. it is starting. And the demo is running. Okay. So now we can execute. So we will simulate our REST API calls using core. Okay. So here I will ask all the data that we have in our NoSQL database. So all the movies that I have. So as you can see here, it is answering, and that is the interesting thing of using Spring Data REST and using our Spring Data SDK. So as you can see here, I am just create my movie repository, and I told to the REST to REST data to Spring Data REST to create all the services for this application, all the endpoints. Now I will use a post in order to put an example. Okay, so I will create a row using my REST. Okay, so here I have the ID. As you can see here, I decide to use a string, so that is a universal ID. Then I can query this. So I forgot something. Oh yeah, I forgot this. So now that is the URL for the data that we insert. So now when using the core, we will have the data that we insert. In this case, we insert a film called, what is the name of the film? Redemption. Okay. And that is my favorite too. So here I will do a query. And in this case, I will search by find title, and I will search Redemption. That is the film that I inserted. And as you can see here, we have the information. So if you remember, find by title is what I define here. But just let me show you what happens if I execute search. If I execute search, it will provide me all the possibility, all the endpoints that I have in order to do a search. So it is, in this case, I am using an Spring feature that called Spring Data REST. So as you can see here, every time that I have something here, I will have the possibility to use this in order to do a query. Okay, and then we can delete also. Here I delete the entry that I put. For example, if I try to look for redemption, it is not here anymore. Okay, I will finish for my test application. Of course, if you prefer to execute this locally, for example, if you are a developer and you don't want to use the cloud service, we have the possibility to use what we call the NoSQL simulator. So if you want to test all your application locally, you can, instead of using the cloud, you can deploy the cloud simulator and you will execute the same application. It is just, again, it is a matter of change the way to do the connection. It is very well documented. Okay. So now just let me deploy. So just for information, so I deploy, let me go to my GitHub repository. So if I go to Oracle NoSQL examples, so here I have a GitHub action. So I have a workflow. And every time that I am merging my code, so I am just creating a container image. And as you can see here, I am creating the container image for x86 or for ARM. That's the thing that I did. So if you look here in the NoSQL GitHub, I have a package, and this package is the container image that we will use to deploy our application. So just let me follow the instructions, and you will see another service that we have that we call container instance. Remember, you can also deploy using a Kubernetes cluster. Just let me go to try to, this just about have some configuration that I need. So that is something that I forgot. So when you are creating tables, you have what we call compartments. So as you can see here, we have multiple compartments. So you can choose when you want to deploy your resources. For example, in my case, I am deploying my container instance. I am deploying my network. I am deploying my NoSQL tables in a compartment that we call demo NoSQL. Okay. So I will obtain this information and I will go to container instance and I will follow the instructions. So create a new container instance. The next step is I need to see that I am in the good virtual cloud network. So just for information, this cloud network, I create this in prepare your environment. And in order to create this, I create also the security policies, and I am doing this using Terraform. Now it's good, so I can say next. And the next step is provide the information about my container. So just let me click in select image. We can use a private repository, a private container registry that we have in OCI, but in my case, I will use an external. So that is the name. I forget to choose. Currently, I am using GitHub Container Registry, but you can use the container registry that you want. Here, I am not using authentication, so I finish from this side. And then I need to create some variables in order to say to my container how we are doing the connection. So just let me create the variables that I have. Finally, just let me cook. So in this case, I will use a connection. So instead of use my API keys and manage and rotate the API keys, I will say I am using a service. The service is container instance. I already set up the configuration to say that this container instance has the privilege to write, read in Oracle NoSQL database. Finally, I need the region. So in our case, we are connecting to Paris. So we are connecting to Paris. And here I have my compartment. So I am using an identifier. I can also use the name. And that is good. So now I can create my container instance. So using the image that I created. Just let me wait a little bit for the creation of the container. Okay, and just let me show you what we are doing. So in fact, if you remember here, I have my resource application. So currently this application properties, I am using some default values, or I am configuring using n variables. So in my case, it is why I am providing the NoSQL service type, I am providing the region, and I'm providing the NoSQL comp ID. And if you look for the connections, I will say I will use what we call resource principal. And here I am doing the call to the good functions in order to do the connection. Just let me see where we are. This is still creating. There is some questions, Fabio, or not yet?
Not yet. I will just ask here on the chat if there is anyone that wants to make some questions, but you can continue.
Okay, I think that I did something wrong. Okay. It is a good demo. So I missed something. Okay. And I think that instead of debugging, I will continue with the most interesting, Okay, I did something bad when putting the image. Okay, but just let me continue. Okay, it's not a big deal for our demo. Just let me show you here when we are reviewing the code. I put, so here I want to click here. And here we have an example of workflow, or I am deploying my application using GitHub options. So it means that, for example, every time that I am doing the merge, I can execute completely and deploy my application using this method. So using GitHub actions. So as you can see here, I am defining some variables, and at the end, what is this? Oh, that is, I already showed you this. Sorry. So I will continue. I just want to show this one. So in this case, that is the file with the DDL to create my table. So I am creating the table using the same thing that I show you using the OCI CLI commands. So in this case, we will use this GitHub action that we call run OCI CLI commands. Here I am using the version 1.1. And then after creating my table, I am just configuring my Kubernetes cluster, and I am saying to deploy my application. So if you go here, so just let me go to here. If you go here, I create a small YAML file. So in this case, I am creating a load balancer, but if you look, I am using the same image that I was using previously, and the thing that I am changing is the way to do the connection. Okay, so that was for this step. So currently, I don't know if we have questions about the live 5. So it is, what are you expecting? What means for you global active table? So in this case, what we want to do is to configure a database that is distributed around multiple regions. So I think that you have some questions,
Sure.
Fabio.
Yeah. Yes. 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 It's about the deployment. Yeah. About distributed on the global services. It's what do you expect from a database for a geo distributed application. And I know that we have a lot of insights. So please.
Okay, so we have multiple possibilities. So for example, I can say I have my table here. So if you remember my table movie, and I can say I just need to go to another region and create the same table and copy the data. But for this specific case, so for example, that is my catalog, it is not exactly what I want. But for example, for other use case, for example, IoT, yes, I can say, in fact, I want a local table that that represents a logical table. For example, I can say I have my stream data, and I will have a table that I call stream data in Paris, and I will create a new table that I call stream data in Ashburn. And of course, in the market, you have also some databases that are able to do this, and you are doing a description. For example, you are saying that you want to partition this table by region, and the, the database will geo-distribute it. Okay, but it is not the case. It is not what I want to do this. Here, what I want to have is a catalog, that is the table movie, and I will replicate this table to another location, for example, Sydney, but I don't want to have only two regions. For example, in my case, I am expecting to deploy, for example, in Sydney, I am expecting to deploy in Japan, I am expecting to deploy in Paris, I am expecting to deploy in Ashburn, and I am expecting to deploy in Latin America. And the interesting thing is every time that I am doing an update in the movie table, I am expecting to replicate to the other databases. So in this case, I am saying I am using an active replication. Of course, there are tools that are able to do this, but currently what I want is something that is fully managed and easy to configure and easy to deploy. So just let me show you how to do this using Oracle NoSQL tables. And for Oracle NoSQL table, we will use something that we call global active table. So just let me show you how to create a global active table. So the main idea is I will follow the instructions. I know very well the instructions. So I will go to the movie. I will go to replica, and I will add a replica. When I am adding a replica, I can choose what is the region that I want to deploy this replica. So remember, we have some regions that are here, and I have also other regions that I didn't subscribe. So when doing the add replica, you have here the regions available for replication. And just for reminder, you have also the regions that you are not already subscribed. So for example, if I want to deploy Johannesburg, the first thing that I need to do is subscribe to this replication. But just let me create this in Ashburn. And an interesting thing when you are using global active tables is that you can have the read writes and the read units and the write units. So that is your workload that is specific for every single region. For example, in my case, in Paris, I am expecting a low activity, so read capacity 10 and write capacity 10. But for Ashburn, I am expecting more customers because I have more people connected to Ashburn. That is something that is interesting, but when you are doing the capacity planning and you have only one region and you need to add a new region, you are always thinking, oh, what is the impact for my full database? In this case, you don't need to think about what is the global impact because you are doing region per region. So for example, I already configured for Paris. I can configure differently for Ashburn. In this case, of course, we will have the same storage because we want to replicate the data. So it means that we have some properties that are global to the totality of the global active tables, and there are others that are local at this table. And for example, if for performance region you want to create indexes, every time that you are creating an index in one region, it will be replicated to the other regions. Okay, so just let me click here. And now the difference is here I am in Paris, and here I am in Ashburn. So if you go to the data, when you will execute, as you can see here, we have exactly the same data that we have in Paris. We have exactly the same data in Ashburn. Let me see what I am doing something now. So now I can test my application. So I will do exactly the same instruction that I did here to test my application. So instead of using my cloud editor, this time I will use what we call Cloud Shell. It's taking some time. So as you can see here, I will execute exactly the same instruction. The only difference, if you remember, here we have a variable called NoSQL region. Here it is US Ashburn. And if you go here, if you remember, forget what is the name exactly. Copy. So when we are here, we are in Paris. So we are deploying exactly the same application. So I will run the application. the application started. Oh, it's not it. Let me see. Okay, so here we have the application that we're running. Okay, I will leave here. And I don't know, Fabio, if you have other questions on your side. I think that I finished, but maybe because I have time, I can show an extra for our.
Yeah, sure. We don't have any questions. The only thing that we had on the chat was from Otavio that is seeing us that saying that the presentation is super clear. So I think this is why there is no question because it's not an habit because some of our attendees are a little bit shy. But yeah, please. So Maxter, you have we have some time before we finish.
Okay.
So please.
Okay, so just let me show you that I want to share with our attendees is, if you remember, I told that we will deploy the application and then we will use a DNS feature that we call geosteering, and we will use the geosteering in order to say when someone is, for example, in Latin America, we will go to this region. When someone is in Europe, we will use, for example, to Frankfurt, in my case, Paris. And when we are in Australia, we will say, I want to go to, for example, Australia. Of course, if you want to deploy a new replica, you just need to add a new replica. So I just, for example, I can say I want a replica in Mumbai, and in this case, I will add a new replica. Okay, so just let me go to the networking and just let me go to traffic management steering policies. And we will create a traffic management steering policy. Okay. Here I will say that I will use geolocation steering. I will call my policy, for example, in this case, movie geo distributed. And for example, I will say, okay, I will call this, for example, Latin America. And I will say here, I will put a name. So for example, I will say, okay, that is Sao Paulo. And here I will provide my IP address. I'll provide an IP address. So if you remember here, I have an error, but when you are deploying, for example, using container instance, at the end, you will have a public IP. Okay. Of course, you can create, so you have a public IP, so you will copy this public IP. Of course, you can use an API management, so an API gateway, and here you will provide the ID for the application. So for the API gateway, for example, I can say 12.12.3. At the end, I will not execute, and here I will say Europe. I will call this Paris. I will select again the same thing. And here I will say that it is running in another ID. And here, that is the interesting thing. I will create my geolocalization steering rules. So for example, in this case, I will say, if I am in South America, I will go first to LATAM. If for any reason I have a problem, I can choose another one. In this case, I can say, I don't want to have issues. So even if I have a performance issue, I prefer to have an answer. So in this case, if something is wrong with LATAM, I will go to Europe. And here, I want to create a new rule. And I can say, currently, I am only deployed in Europe. And I forgot, and I also deploy here. So I can say, in fact, Just let me add something else here. I will add an additional pool, and I will call this North America. So imagine that you are putting the good name here. So I don't know, Asborn, and I will copy something here. Now I will say that for North America, I will go first to North America, and if I have a problem, I will go to Latin. And here you can continue to create your roles. And after creating your policy, when you will access um, your application, you have the possibility to distribute, to contact the good, go to the good region. Or for example, if you are a user and you are using an URL, instead of going, for example, to Paris, you will go directly to Ashburn. And if something is wrong in Ashburn, you will go to Latam because that is the rule that we defined here. So it is all from my side. So just to summarize, so why we decide to use global active table is to have the possibility to provide local access to the application. So in this case, we are saying that we are boosting the performance and we are improving the experience for our end users. And the interesting thing, and we are deploying exactly the same application. For example, here in Ashburn, we are deploying exactly the same application in Paris. And when we are query, we are accessing exactly to the same data because our global active tables are replicating the information between the two regions. So if for any reason, for example, I modify a movie in my catalog, it will be automatically replicated to the other replica in my table. And if for any reason I update a data here, I will replicate to the other members of my global active table. And finally, I can do this. I can set up this for every single table differently because currently, as you can see here, that is a global active table, and this table is not a global active table. But if you remember, I can have also information that I want to replicate, but I also create some um, objects that I don't want to replicate, but I, for example, in this case, I want to have a local copy in every single region. So it is all from my side, Fabio. I think that it is time for you to wrap up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we don't have any questions. So thank you for this session. It was very enlightening. I hope that our attendees, our viewers, enjoyed it. So he had uh, one time during our live stream, we had almost 20 people, which I think it's very good for a live stream at this hour after work and after a long time absence that we had because of the summer and because of some other events. So I think this is also thank to you. And again, Dario, thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoyed to present this talk, to deliver this talk. We already share your contacts, your LinkedIn contacts in our meetup group. There is also in our YouTube channel. So if you want to speak with Dario, please feel free. I think he's more than happy to answer your questions. To add him on LinkedIn and Twitter and among the other social media contacts. So thank you again and see you next time.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.